What's up, everyone? Hazarel here for another E3 2014 press conference recap and reactions video. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about the Electronic Arts press conference of 2014 at E3. And just going into the conference, I didn't really expect too much from EA because they're primarily known, so like for their sports games and things like that. And really sports games, as you're gonna hear, so like throughout the entirety of this video, the only thing that really sports games can really do in the long run is just improve the graphics and the controls of the game and the environments. you know in the long run, they can't really do that much else to them. But for the people out there that like sports games, they did offer quite a bit that you know, may or may not put a smile on your face. So, with that being said, let's get into the conference recap. So, first off, the EA press conference kicks off with a trailer at DICE Studios in Stockholm, Sweden for Star Wars Battlefront. And their team was explaining how, for this upcoming title, they were really trying to capture the fine details as accurately as they can for this game. And to do this, they went to the Lucas uh, Cultural Arts Museum to capture the actual props that were used in the movies. And not only did they do that, but the team at DICE also went back to the original filming locations to capture the planet battle scenes from the movies. And they also mentioned that they're working with Lucasfilms on this project, and Star Wars Battlefront will be coming spring of 2015. So, for the people that played Star Wars or who has grown up with the game, hearing about them going back. I mean, like for the people who haven't, paid attention to Star Wars or don't care about that series of games, them doing this isn't going to do anything for them. But for the people that they're obviously targeting, which is guys like myself and other people that grew up with Star Wars, and they have also played like the Star Wars games and things like that. For them to actually go back and try to capture the props that were used in the movies and heading back to the original filming locations and things like that, to really put that much attention to detail into a video game, first of all, is great. But to do that for Star Wars, I think they really deserve a round of applause for that, because that's some sometimes it's really like the fine details that make it's like the small details that really make the biggest difference. Excuse me. So, props to the team at DICE Studios for doing that. So next up, the CEO of Electronic Arts, Andrew Wilson, comes out to introduce Dragon Age Inquisition. And then out comes this woman on like a moving platform, and she's playing like a bass violin. And as she's playing on the bass, the trailer for the game is playing in the background, showing off the game's visuals, locations, monsters, and characters, etc. And it just looks beautiful. And it was a nice performance. It was a nice treat. So after the performance, Aaron Flynn, studio GM at Electronic Arts, comes out to speak about Dragon Age Inquisition and how they plan on combining powerful narratives with open world gameplay. And he gives a bit more insight on the game about how you step up into the world as the Inquisitor, um, and the choices you make can determine how certain things happen in the game, and how you can take different approaches in the game. One of which they showed that allowed you to take control of your teammates just by charging into the fight head on. During the demo, they were showing how they used each of the characters to surround the dragon that they were fighting, and how the player can take control of each of the characters in the party to attack at different angles. They were using an archer, a warrior, a mage, and what looked to be like an assassin or a thief. Because I know normally in games like this, characters that have like twin daggers, normally they're like either thieves or like assassins, or what have you. But not only could you use them for offensive purposes, but that you can also use them for uh, defensive purposes as well. And at like the last minute of the demo, what they did was that they switched like to characters, and the dragon flew up and he blew breath, blew his fire breath at the team, and he moved one of them out of harm's way at the last minute, and that was pretty much like the end of the demo. But it was pretty cool. Aaron Flynn then explains the tactical camera, which can allow you to remove time from the equation by pausing the battle to take a look at the battlefield, issue orders, and to take control. They then explain that each of the team members, each of the members of your team has their own backstory, and they play a trailer introducing each one. Now, forgive me, but it was hard to understand the narrator clearly, and she had like a thick accent, so it made it hard to understand what some of the characters' names were. So forgive me if I get them wrong. Now, who they showed in the trailer, it was a warrior by the name of either Black War or Black Wolf, and I hope I got that right. It was Sarah, an elf archer, a mercenary named Ironbone. I didn't hear her too good, and it was a mage named Vivian. And the game will be coming out October 7th this year. And they introduced some nice things for the game. Like I can't really get into too much about it, but like they, you know, just like the tactics that they are having you use in the game, and the things that they seem to be introducing seem interesting, with this game. So that was cool. So next, a trailer plays where game developers were explaining what they did, or what were, excuse me. Next, a trailer plays where game developers were explaining um, what did gamers want in the upcoming Mass Effect game, and one of the most requested suggestions was to go somewhere new, new characters, new people to fall in love with, etc. And they hinted at a new IP, but that they didn't get a name of, but they wanted players to experience like a fictional world that felt real and that was ever changing, as they said. So next up, Rachel Franklin, executive producer, comes out to talk about the new Sims game, with smarter Sims, with real personalities, and how they will be meaningful and sometimes weird stories you can have in the game. She then went on to say that in previous Sims games you controlled the mind and the body of your Sims, but in Sims 4, which is this game, you'll be able to control their hearts. They showed off the character customization features, how you can increase like the width of the shoulders and the ears, and like the height of the character, etc. But also how you can select their personality. And a couple of what they showed were being ambitious or them being a perfectionist. So it all goes towards their emotions and how they behave and interact with other Sims. She goes on to mention that in Sims 4, they have lively neighborhoods where pretty much anything can happen. And there was a small clip of a guy, I caught, like he was at like a children's playground, but he was fishing. Now, I don't know if I wasn't paying attention good enough, but it looked like he was fishing in like the sandbox, kind of. Um, I don't know, like the camera was moving around pretty fast, but he seemed to be fishing at the children's playground, but that was just something weird that caught my eye. But yeah, each character has like their own story, and then she takes you into a local gym and shows you how it influences the gameplay from their personality, and things that happen following up to that. And just from being in the gym, how you can tell how your Sims are feeling. Now, while some of them were very upbeat during like their workouts in the gym, you had others that were sad, some were depressed, some of them were just like sweating profusely. You had others that were energized, etc. So they went into a character named Chuck, who Rachel created to be a hothead. So he was already losing his mind in a conversation that he was having with one of the other characters. So Chuck was all pumped up and geared up, ready to work out, and then how she got him this way was earlier that day she had Chuck speaking with his neighbor Gladys, and Chuck starts to uh, recite poetry to her, but he wasn't leveled up enough, so his poetry sucked, and this is when the personalities of the game begin to come into play, because the poem sucked so much that Gladys actually got physical with Chuck, and like they began fighting. So after losing the fight to Gladys, Chuck was mad about it going into the next day, which he used like to work out. So because Chuck was still mad about it, the next day after his workout, later on that night, Chuck decides to have a party and to cheer himself up. And the entire neighborhood showed up, and Chuck is feeling playful and happy. And then Gladys comes in, who is still looking for a flight. She's beating up like a stuffed teddy bear on the side, and because she's coming in with a foul mood, she's directly affecting everyone else at the party. So they decided to add some more fun to the party. So she went to this gallery where she selected a sim made by another player and dropped her right into the game. And with this character being more jolly and having more of a fun personality, she came right into the party, and she started playing on the piano, and everyone's dancing, and Chuck is laughing and having fun. And because of this, you're pushing the emotions of your character to the extreme. And Chuck was laughing so much that he literally died of laughter, and then death comes out of like a dark void, and he checks him off his list, and they said it was a smarter and weirder Sims coming September 2nd, and that was pretty fucking weird. Everything that I seen in that Sims segment was literally funny, and it was just weird. That's basically how you can explain. That's basically the only way I can explain that. It was just weird. So next up, they played a trailer with Bruce Lee doing his famous uh, "become water" speech. You know, saying like when you pour water into a cup, it becomes the cup. When you pour it into a teapot, it becomes a teapot. You know what I'm saying? And then the game is EA Sports UFC, and you have champion UFC fighters, in the trailer praising Bruce Lee for being an amazing fighter that he was, and how they inspired them, and how his style is what gave birth to mixed martial arts, because it inspired people to want to be more like Bruce Lee, and how there will never be another Bruce Lee, etc., etc. And then the trailer stops suddenly, and the creative director Brian Hayes comes out and says, in UFC everyone can be Bruce Lee." And then they show a demo of Bruce Lee versus BJ Penn, and on screen their names are there, and they're next to these clear silhouettes, and as they're getting hit, different parts of their body on the silhouette would glow red. And he then goes to explain like the differences between fighting styles. And since BJ Penn was a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if I heard him right, he would go for a submission. So he tackles Bruce Lee, he gets on top of him, and he tries to put him in a triangle hold. Then you see this interface, and it's a screen where you're using that they were using to try to get Bruce Lee in that triangle hold, and you can push up, down, left, right, and in order for you to get the hold on them quicker or correctly, you know. But Bruce Lee, with him being more of a striker, he rolls over BJ, and he uh, gets the fight off of the ground, and they begin to fight back on their feet. So, Bruce Lee, like, he then jumps off the cage and he does like a roundhouse to BJ's head. So BJ goes for a punch, literally swings at air, then Bruce goes for a quick kick to the face, and then BJ was out cold. And that was the end of the demo, and the game was announced for June 17th. So, some pretty, uh, decent UFC fighting going on in the demo. Nothing, they got you too excited. Now, I understand what they're trying to do. Like, they're trying to use Bruce Lee as like a selling point to get you to like buy the game. But to me, it really just looks like another sports fighting game. That's all it really came off as. Nothing too impressive about the demo, you know. So that's pretty much how I felt about it. So next up, Dean Richards, the studio GM, comes out to talk about NHL 15, and people have been asking what will be different in NHL 15, and he said that you will have um, these improved graphics, how each of the players will now have more pivots for whatever that means, how the audience will be more realistic than it's you know than it's ever been, and improve the arenas. And then they played a gameplay trailer of the game, and the graphics do look pretty good, and it was a bit of fighting going on in there. Of course, it's hockey, and that was it. And I don't think they gave the game a release date. I didn't see one, but again, it was about improved graphics, improved controls, improved arenas, environments. That's going to be like the theme here when it comes to all of these sports games. Just like I said in the beginning. Next up, Patrick Soderlund, the executive vice president of EA Studios, comes out to talk about Speed. At which point, I assume they were talking about a racing game, but then they said they want to focus into when it comes to racing games or anything like that. They want to get straight into the fun as quickly as possible. So then the trailer plays from an early creation from Criterion Games. And you see this guy walking out of a hangar on a helipad, and he cuts to footage of Burnout Paradise. And really, all you're seeing is a car crashing in, into everything in sight, like the sides of buses and other vehicles. And then the team speaks on how they're making changes at a moment's notice, like they're going in the game and fixing whatever the issue they find, and in 5 minutes they're back into testing the game to see how well it works. They go on to talk about how in this game they will not only have cars but ATVs, helicopters, boats, and like they even showed a few screenshots of guys with parachutes being tied up to back of said vehicles, and as the vehicles are just speeding through, um, the guys on the parachutes are literally just flying in the air. So you'll also be able to go on various terrains from roads to snow to water. Of course there's boats in the game. Duh. Uh, they showed a clip of like a small clip of the game's of like the game being in action, and what it seems like you're able to do is jump from one vehicle into another. Because in the demo, what they did was, now mind you, this game was in early development. Again, early development. They were showing prototypes of the game, and in that prototype, what you're able to do is, or what they did was, they jumped out of a helicopter onto an ATV, and then the helicopter crashed and burned and blew up. So it looks like you're able to jump from vehicle to vehicle in that game, and that seems pretty cool. And mind you, all of this was done in first person because they want you to experience what it's like to be in those vehicles. So I'm looking forward to when that game gets a release date. Next up, Cam Weber, the studio group GM, comes out to talk about golf and how in past golf games you're always limited by where you could go and what you could do. And now they're using the Frostbite 3 engine that was used in Battlefield 4 to improve the graphics of PGA Tour in stunning detail. The environments will be fully rendered, and there won't be any load times between holes. They then explain, or like they didn't play a trailer for the game, and you see, like deer walking around and the sprinklers on, and how you can either play on world famous courses or extreme fantasy courses. And in the trailer, they show these fighter jets flying over your head, and then you see these Navy ships these Navy battleships, on the water, and the golfer that they had in the trailer, he knocks a ball over the ships into a hole that was right on the other side of it. So uh, it's basically golfing without limits, and that was PGA Tour coming spring of 2015. Next up, he goes into Madden 15 and how players wanted defense to be more fun and enjoyable. And more enjoyable. So new features that they're bringing to this game for defense is that they give the defense teams, more options. And one of those options was that before, if you were on defense, like the camera was always behind. Now what you were able to do, like you're able to rotate the camera to the front side to get a better view as to where you want your teammates to go. Also, like you're able to move the offensive team's players into any direction you want, after the ball is hiked. So, say if you're trying to rush to the quarterback and, their teammates are in the way, you can push them either to the left or to the right as they did in the demo. Hold on one second here. Another thing that that they spoke on. Hold on, I lost my place. I wrote down some notes, so forgive me if I'm like a bit lost right now. I'm trying to recatch my place. Um, okay, here we are. All right, I found it. Yeah, he announced that also you'll be able to move the offensive team's players into any direction you want to go for your advantage, or how you can use a pass rush move to sack the quarterback. So and he addressed how open field tackling has always been an issue, which is true. I've played past Madden games, and there were Madden games that had like the hit stick and other features like that, and it seemed like tackling was always one of the more difficult things to do in the game, or like one of the trickier things to do, I should say. And he acknowledges that it has been an issue. So they redesigned the open field, uh, the open field tackling system to ensure some better results, or much better results, by using what they call a teetering tackle cone. And while your teammate is running towards the ball carrier, like this cone is going to appear in front of you. And um, what you're able to do is that you can change where the cone is, and what you want to do is that you want to line up the cone with the ball carrier so that your player that you're controlling tackles uh, that ball carrier. Also, they said that you can hang back and do conservative tackles where you can strafe from left to right to catch a runner, and or you can do an aggressive tackle, which is a bit more risky, and it does take more skill to do. Up close, you can go for a hit, or you can dive in front of the runner, dive in front of the runner to basically stop him in his tracks, or like you can just trip him, things like that. So you can dive in front of him, and like you can make him fall. So instead instead of feeling like a liability on defense, you can have more fun basically. And they even added real-time reactions to the players to capture the emotions of the moment. So if your player tackles the ball carriers, and then, what I'm saying, they may let out like a loud roar, or even high five another teammate, etc. And Madden 2015 was announced to be launched for August 26th. So that's coming in a couple more months. Next up, they played a trailer for the MOBA Dawngate, and they talked about how they developed the game in front of gamers that like MOBAs, and they listened to the feedback from them whether they wanted to hear it or not. So Oh man, my bad for coughing in the mic. But they went on to talk about how they built the game and how the gameplay of the game is going to be, and how the success of your team is going to be based on how well you build your team, and the game will turn out differently every time because of that. And there are various characters with various roles to play, like support. You know, some characters are more geared towards offense, other characters are more geared towards defense. Some are more geared towards some are more geared towards healing and things like that. So they also mentioned that they were a group of diehard MOBA fans and they were building the game basically a game that they would enjoy, because if they didn't like it, then they knew that you wouldn't like it. So that was a nice way to end that trailer. Next up, Andrew Wilson came back out to speak on how EA, they're listening to direct feedback from the gamers, and they are doing it during the earliest stages of the game, and they want to put the gamers first. And then a trailer plays for Mirror's Edge and how they're rebuilding Faith to keeping features that made her iconic. For example, like her red glove and like the tattoo under her eye and things like that. So they mentioned how they were working with parkour artists to come in and talk to them and explain uh, the moves that they were using in the game and how they could expand on it. They go on to explain how Mirror's Edge is about exploring the environments and finding different paths, knowing that it's just not one way to get where you're trying to go. So somebody who's more of a risk taker may find a more difficult yet shorter path, but somebody who may be kind of reserved may end up finding a much safer path, and but that path, so like will be longer. And that's when you discover like the surroundings and also what Faith is able to do. So then they go into combat and how they're using Faith's agility and skills to form the combat style that she uses. They also talk about sound accuracy to the hits to give more of an effect on how strong the attacks are. And that was the end of the trailer. So that was it for Mirror's Edge. Next up, executive producer Dave Rudder comes out to talk about FIFA 15 and how you can feel the emotion like never before. The trailer featured emotional intelligence. Players will be able to show their emotions based on the content of the matches, from triumph to defeat, from the triumph of victory to the agony of defeat. Agility and control has been improved to allow you to maneuver and control the ball with ease. Man-to-man battles that allow you to do full uh, body defending, shirt pulling, tackles, authentic player visuals to give uh, photorealistic looks to the characters, and camera angles to capture the skills of the players. Dynamic match play presentation to feel the energy of the crowds, living pitches, and how shoes get dirty, as they said, and the goals move when the ball hits it. And the game will be coming this fall, he mentioned. And again, see, to me that feels like an it really feels like an overhyped sports game again. Like pretty much all he said was that, hey, we improved the graphics, we improved little things here and there, and that's it. So again, that's the reoccurring theme. We improved the graphics, we improved this, we improved that, and that's it for sports. So next up was a trailer for Battlefield Hardline, and Group GM Carl Magnus. Now, please forgive me if I don't pronounce his last name right. Tro Edson of Dice, and Steve uh, Pap Putis. These guys have some weird last names, but yeah, and Steve, the executive president. I mean, not executive president, but the executive producer of Visceral Games, come out to speak more about the game, and they talk about how years they had, and they talk about how about 3 years ago they had a conversation about Dead Space and Battlefield 3 and how they came together to make Battlefield Hardline, and they showed a bunch of screenshots of Hardline, and then they went into a 32-player multiplayer where one team was robbers and the other team was cops. Now, in the demo, they kept switching back and forth from the robbers team to the cops team, so you couldn't really focus too much on what one team was doing, but they focused more on the robbers than the cops. I just wish they would have kept the camera still for a moment because they just kept switching it back and forth non-stop, during the demo. But some of the things that I caught was that in the beginning, the player was playing on the team with the robbers, and like they were shooting at the cop cars, they were blowing them up, and the cop cars were like flipping over them, and they eventually get to underneath a bridge into vehicles, and again, like the camera was switching back and forth between the two teams, and you see the cops shooting from the helicopters down at the robbers, and they were going right down the highway, and this crane just topples over onto other buildings, and then they use it as a ramp to run into the building, and the player takes out a bat and he whacks a cop and kills him on contact. Some crazy stuff, man. And then it goes back to the robbers, and like the team zip lines in order and the team zip lines onto a helipad on top of another building to a getaway copter, and the cops use a sniper rifle, and then the camera of course goes back to the cops, and the cops use a sniper rifle to shoot it down, and the robber, he deploys his parachute, lands on the ground, surrounded by police officers, and he's finally caught, and that was it for the demo. So it was going back and forth for a while. It looked very action packed, but I could not tell what was happening at one moment because they just kept switching it back and forth. So it would have been better had they just took their time and just for like a minute or two let it stay on the robber team, then for a minute or two let it go to the cops. You know what I mean? But it looked very action packed, and they announced that the demo, or not the demo, but the Battlefield Hardline beta, you can go to the website and you can sign up for access to the beta, but it's first come first serve, and they had like this setup of like 64 stations around the building, and it seemed pretty cool. So and that was it for the EA 2014 E3 conference. So my overall thoughts of this conference was that, just like I said in the beginning, the reoccurring theme, for most of the games that they had, which of course was sports titles, was improved graphics, improved controls, and to me, that's not really anything too impressive. I mean, because every game has improved graphics and controls, but what is it that's bringing attention to this game? Now, they had a couple of things, like with Madden. I'm glad they paid attention to like the gamers, and they improved like the defense of the game to improve the tackling and the other defensive options that you had at your disposal that they're introducing in Madden 15. And I like what they was doing with Star Wars Battlefront at Dice Studios. So props to them for paying attention to detail, because I know the fans of Star Wars will really appreciate things like that. Sims is going to be a toss-up for me. I never really played Sims hardcore like that, but to see what they showed at the conference, it was pretty funny, and I enjoyed that little segment. Uh, the nice performance that they had for Dragon Age Inquisition was cool, and the thing that really stood out like a sore thumb to me was again Battlefield Hardline, and that game really, you know, I'm really hoping that I get a chance to play that beta. I'm really hoping I get a chance to play that beta, but you know, I can only try to play it on PC, and I've heard rumors that the game isn't even working properly on PC or on PlayStation 4, but that remains to be seen. So if I'm able to play it, then I most definitely will jump into it. So with that being said, that was it for EA's 2014 E3 conference. Hope you guys enjoyed this recap and reactions video. I'm looking forward to some of the things that they had at the EA Electronic Arts Conference. Like sports games aren't really my forte, but I'm pretty sure the people that are into those will very much appreciate what they did with those games. So thanks for listening. Peace, and I'll talk to you guys later.